This is Ro, your best friend at JMSB. So here I was asked a question for COMM 220, analysis of markets. Let's have a look. Question number 10. Suppose that a subsidy plan is introduced for low-income workers. Under the plan, an unmarried worker with 2 children would receive a tax credit of 30% for income that is less than or equal to $10,000. In addition, the maximum tax credit would be maintained until income reaches $20,000, after which it is taxed away at a rate of 20%. You're told that the individual has a maximum of 4,000 hours of leisure per year and earns a wage of 15 per hour. In required A, it tells us to calculate the level of income at which there is no tax credit. Now, in order to do that, we first need to calculate the maximum tax credit that would be possible under this plan. So in the problem, it tells you that the tax credit is of 30%, and this is for income that is less than or equal to $10,000. And so you're going to get 30% of a tax credit for up to the first $10,000 of income you earn. And this maximum tax credit is going to be maintained until it reaches $20,000. Now, it should be pretty obvious to us that under this plan, the maximum tax credit that could be received by the individual is 30% of $10,000 or $3,000. And that's simply because this maximum tax credit is going to be maintained until the income reaches $20,000. And now, to answer the question, we have to figure out at what level of income is there going to be no tax credit. So we need to understand that in this example, any income that is earned above $20,000 has to be taxed away at a rate of 20%. What that essentially means is that as this individual earns income beyond $20,000, 20% of that income has to be used to repay the tax credit that was received. So essentially, the government gives you 30% of a tax credit for the first $10,000 of income. It lets you keep that 30% tax credit until your income reaches $20,000. And once you start earning more than $20,000, you now need to take 20% of every extra dollar that you've earned beyond $20,000, and you need to use that to repay this $3,000. So essentially what we want to figure out is after how many dollars of income would we have fully repaid the $3,000. And the way that you would calculate that is pretty straightforward. We can argue that Y is your income, so Y minus 20,000 would tell you how much of your income is higher than 20,000. You multiply that by this rate of 20%, and you want to figure out at what point would that amount equal to this 3,000. So Y minus 20,000 times 0.2 has to be 3,000. And if you work out the math, you'll figure out that once your income reaches $35,000, now it's as though there's no tax credit. And that's simply because once your income is at $35,000, it is $15,000 in excess of this $20,000, and 20% of that $15,000 is $3,000. So essentially, once your income reaches $35,000, you would have fully repaid this $3,000. So now that we've understood required A, let's have a look at required B. Here it says, illustrate on a diagram the 3 different zones pertaining to this program. So the idea now is to illustrate the individual's budget constraint between leisure hours and income. So we're essentially going to set up a graph where on the y-axis we'll place income in dollars, and on the x-axis we'll place leisure hours. In this example, we're told that the individual has a maximum of 4,000 leisure hours available per year, and that they're earning a wage of 15 per hour. Using this information, we should have the ability of coming up with the intercepts of our budget line. So on the x-axis, the intercept is going to be at 4,000, and on the y-axis, we're going to have 4,000 times 15, or 60,000 of income. And this should be pretty intuitive. If the person decides to spend all of these 4,000 hours working, and so leisure hours are 0, the maximum income they could earn would be 60,000. In contrast, if these discretionary hours are all used chilling, so not earning income, but rather as leisure, in this case income would be 0, and the maximum leisure hours would be 4,000. And so if I were to connect these two intercepts, the resulting line would represent the individual's budget line in absence of this tax credit program. So that's what the budget line would look like had there been no tax credit. And now what we want to illustrate is how does the program change this budget line. What you want to understand is that for the first $10,000 of income that the individual earns, the individual will be entitled to a 30% tax credit. And so as the income reaches 10,000, rather than earning 10,000 for the same amount of leisure hours, the individual would in fact have 13,000. And so the budget line is essentially going to start kinking outward. And then in the problem, it tells us that this maximum tax credit is maintained until your income reaches 20,000. And so from 10,000 up until 20,000, you're going to be maintaining this extra $3,000 that the government offered you. And so once your income reaches 20,000, it's as though you'd actually have earned 23. You'd be 3,000 on top for the same amount of leisure hours. And what happens once your income surpasses 20,000? Now you have to start repaying the tax credit that the government offered you. In required A, you calculated that you would have fully repaid the 3,000 tax credit once your income reaches $35,000. And so on your graph, you want to illustrate that. You want to show that once income is at 35,000, now you have fully repaid this 3,000 of tax credit. And so essentially the effect of this program is that it causes a kink and an outward shift of the individual's budget line. And if you want to sort of illustrate the zones that are involved, well, we could have zone 1, which is when the individual earns between $0 to $10,000. In this zone, the individual is receiving 30% of their income as a tax credit. Evidently, as soon as income reaches 10,000, now they would have maxed it out, and the most credit that they could possibly get would be 3,000. The second zone is for income between 10,000 and 20,000. In this zone, what is happening is that the government is letting the individual keep the maximum tax credit. And then finally, as soon as your income surpasses 20,000, now you need to begin repaying some of this tax credit back to the government. And so zone 3 is where the individual is repaying the tax credit that they received. In zone 3, as soon as your income reaches 35,000, now it's going to be as though there was no tax credit. So I hope this explanation helps. This is a very typical exam-like question for Professor Bertram Somers. So if you're faced with it, hopefully you guys will get it right. I appreciate you guys posting your questions. Make sure you tag your friends if you feel like this video could help them. In the meantime, I hope you guys keep studying. Good luck with your courses, guys. Row out.